Chapter 7 The Outing, Hanyu's POV. When the attendant came to take Hanyu to the upper deck, Lord Antony waved him off without looking up from the map he was examining. "Enjoy the day," his god said. His voice was absent, but Hanyu felt his chest warm delightfully at the acknowledgement nevertheless. "Thank you, my lord," he chirped on his way out of the door. "You have a good day, too. I'll see you later." The attendant regarded him curiously once the door had shut. "You seem awfully cheerful." "Of course!" Hanyu smiled. He knew he was staring at the man, but he couldn't help himself. The attendant seemed to be in his mid-30s, and handsome in a broad, tired kind of way. Most importantly, he was someone new, and very obviously human. Hanyu used to be intimidated by older people. He was accustomed to spending most of his time with his cadre, and all the adults in the temple seemed so unfathomably old and authoritative that he had trouble thinking of anything about his presence that could possibly be of interest to them. After spending the last day and a half, 2 days? Shit, time moves strangely with no windows. In close quarters with an immortal god, Hanyu found himself not the least bit intimidated by the attendant. "What's your name?" he asked, and the man smiled at him. "Bunta," he replied. "And yours?" "Hanyu. Have you lived here long?" "Since my own offering. That was 2 cycles ago." 12 years. Hanyu would have been only 8, and to be honest, he barely remembered that offering, beyond the sacred procession. Was that the year he'd lit Asao on fire? Either way, he was quite sure he didn't remember any of the older boys who'd been sacrificed that year, and Bunta's face was unfamiliar. He felt a little ashamed that he didn't recall the man, but then, how many of the younger boys at the temple would remember him? In a year or 2, would anyone in the city of his birth even remember his face? That was a lonely thought, and he shook it away. He had a new life now, with Asao and their friends and Lord Antony, and Bunta was a part of that as well. They walked for what seemed like an hour before a set of solidly carved wooden steps led them out to the upper deck of the vessel. Hanyu froze at the top of the stairs, overwhelmed with sensations. After all that time in Lord Antony's sitting room, the sense of open air all around him was intoxicating. He breathed deeply of the fresh sea breeze and relished the heavy briny stink of it. The breeze seemed to tingle against his skin, and it felt almost as good as his hair in Lord Antony's fingers. Best of all was the sun. Its heat pressed insistently against the skin of his face and neck, and Hanyu wished he could strip and bask in its rays the way they used to do at the temple. Was that allowed here? He would have to ask. Hanyu would have closed his eyes to savor all these sensations, but the sight laid out before him was too lovely for him to even consider ignoring it. It was a gorgeous day, just a few delicate puffs of perfectly white clouds scuttling across the sky as if they had urgent business on the other side of the horizon and had no intention of being delayed in their journey, and the dizzying expanse of the sea laid out glittering under the sky made it seem so much bluer than it ever had back in the city. "Hanyu!" The happy cry jolted his attention to a place a little further down the deck where a group was standing and waving at him. Hanyu glanced over quickly at Bunta, who nodded encouragingly, and then he ran the few yards to join them. Oh gods, oh shit, it felt wonderful to stretch his legs and move. It was even more wonderful to melt into the happy chatter of his friends, who stood in a loose cluster overseen by a handful of attendants. "There you are!" cried Jen, pulling him into a hug. Taiki ruffled his hair. "We were afraid you'd be too busy with Lord Antony to come mingle with the peasants." "Oh, stop," Hanyu laughed. Joy glowed in him. Bright as the shining sea at their affection, he glanced around. "Where's Asao?" "Too busy with Lord Marcus to mingle with the peasants," Daiji quipped with a meaningful leer, and Jen dissolved into a fit of giggles. Hanyu felt a bit of relief mixed unexpectedly with his disappointment. He'd realized he'd been more nervous about meeting Asao and Asao's possible resentment than he'd realized. He also felt a sick little twinge of his own jealousy. Of course Asao's master wanted his intimate service. If Lord Antony had Asao, he'd probably be too excited about fucking him to let him go for even a few hours, just like Lord Marcus. Instead he had Hanyu, and he had put him in the sitting room and probably been glad of his departure. Kenta sidled up to them, breaking Hanyu's melancholy train of thought. "Morio and Shinji aren't here either. They were too seasick to leave their beds." "I was seasick too," Daiji confessed. "I almost threw up on the first god to drink from me." Hanyu cooed sympathetically, but in the privacy of his own mind, that made him feel a little better about his own slip-up with the eggs. "So what's it like?" Jen blurted. Tyche glared at him, and he threw up his hands. "I'm sorry, but we were all wondering. Someone was going to ask. What's it like to be a personal attendant? We only see the gods for a little while, when they need blood, so we're not really getting to know any of them. So what are they like, Lord Antony and Lord Theodora?" "Lord Theodora is very nice," Kenta said readily. Hanyu gawked at him with the others. It was a strange word to hear applied to the fearsome legendary goddess. Father Shu said that when storms brewed near Lord Antony's ship, it was Lord Theodora who took the helm and shouted right back at the thunder until it was cowed and the storms dissipated. Father Shu had never said that she was nice. Kenta shrugged. "She is. I really did throw up when she was about to drink from me, so don't feel too bad, Daiji. I threw up all over her, but she didn't get mad. She just showed me where to bathe and sent me to bed and didn't drink from me until I was feeling better." "That is pretty nice," Jen admitted. "She wasn't angry at all?" "No, I thought she might just be hiding it, because she's so fearsome in the stories, and she looks terrifying, so I couldn't believe she wouldn't mind. But Hiseo said she wasn't faking it, and she hasn't seemed—" "Hold on," Hanyu interrupted. "Who's Hiseo?" "One of her old attendants," Kenta explained. "She's kept all of them, even Chihiro, and he's so old his mind wanders, and someone has to watch him all the time to make sure he doesn't leave her rooms and walk off the edge of the ship, so I'm sure she's not drinking from him anymore. She told me it was her job to take care of us since we take care of her by giving her our blood and talking with her, so she'd never make me leave if I don't want to, even when she gets her next offering." Hanyu was pierced with sudden, sick jealousy. Lord Antony might have decided not to get rid of him, but there was no way he'd keep Hanyu once he had someone better. That was 6 years away, and not worth worrying about now, but it would be nice to have the same reassurance that Kenta had. "Just talking and blood?" Kenta prodded, causing Tyche to groan. Kenta blushed a little. "Yes, she only likes women for that, but I don't mind. She just likes talking to me, and she doesn't talk a lot herself, but she really does seem to be interested in what I have to say, even though I get awfully nervous chattering at her. Like I said, she's nice." Hanyu was fairly certain that Lord Antony did not like talking with him. "What about Lord Antony?" Daiji asked. "He's been very good to me," Hanyu said unhappily. "He's so fast and strong, I can hardly believe what my own eyes are telling me. It's thrilling, and he's so beautiful I can hardly stand it, but I keep making one mistake after another. I'm afraid he'll never let me into his bed." A horrible thought occurred. What if Lord Antony doesn't like boys either, like Lord Theodora? "It's not that," one of the older attendants put in kindly. "He and Lord Marcus are lovers, but he doesn't ever bed humans, only the other gods." Hanyu wasn't sure whether to be relieved because it wasn't his fault or anything he was doing wrong, or crushed because there was no chance he'd get the god to change his mind. "Now, come on, that's enough gossiping," the same attendant said gently, seeming to sense his disappointment. "Let's get some exercise." Antony's POV. His chambers were blessedly quiet with the boy gone. Antony indulged himself in a nap, then started his preparation for tonight's battle. Well, it wouldn't be much of a battle, considering they were going up against humans. Tonight's slaughter, then. He was sharpening his sword when the boy returned, which was as loud an affair as he might have expected. Hanyu called a jaunty farewell to someone in the hallway, the attendant, presumably, then strode into the room looking irritatingly flushed and cheerful and radiant with youth and health. His skin had been wiped clean, but his hair was still damp with sweat, and his chest was still rising and falling more quickly than was usual for him. Antony couldn't wait to eat. The boy flashed him a grin as he sank to his knees and bent into his bow. "Hello, my—" His voice cut off and his head jerked back up, as if invisible puppet strings had just received a hard yank. Wide brown eyes goggled at Antony's sword. "Hello, Hanyu." Antony couldn't resist one last stroke of his whetstone, a particularly slow one just to make the metal ring and the boy gawk. Which both did, most satisfactorily. Once he'd had his fun, Antony set the blade aside, wiped his hands, and got to his feet. "How did you enjoy your excursion?" The boy's throat moved bewitchingly in a hard gulp. "My lord, what's this?" Antony gestured to a sword. "I told your king we'd drive off the raiders in exchange for you, pet, remember? We're arriving at the captured villages in a few hours. A deal's a deal." "Oh," the sacrifice said faintly. He seemed to realize he was staring and ducked his head back down. His forehead thumped faintly against the carpet, reminding Antony of their first meeting. "Weren't you expecting this?" Against his will, Antony was a little curious. "You were there when we made the agreement." "Well, yes," the boy said, "but I didn't—" I don't know. It's strange to see with a sword, my lord. Strange? Antony prepared to be offended. I guess superfluous? You're already so strong and fast, my lord. Why do you need a sword? Well, it was hard to be offended by that. I don't, he replied, permitting himself a bit of boasting. Now get up, pet, and come here. I'll be stronger and faster yet if I've just eaten. Oh, yes! The boy was stumbling to his feet, eyes sparkling. Antony had never had a sacrifice who was this eager to be fed from. Did he get off on the pain of the initial penetration, or the lightheadedness that followed? Others had, but even they hadn't been so fucking thrilled. It annoyed Antony not to know exactly how his actions were being interpreted. Hanyu scrambled over to where Antony was standing and tilted his head, baring his neck. On your knees, Antony instructed. The last thing I need is for you to fall and crack your fool head open. On carpet? Hanyu asked incredulously. At the look Antony gave him, he gulped, added a belated, "My lord," and dropped down to his knees. Antony crouched beside him and carefully peeled away the bandage still guarding the little punctures from his previous feeding. They were healing beautifully. It was almost a shame to reopen them. Antony stroked the skin, a touch regretfully. Hanyu moaned. The sound mixed with the heady scent of his sweat-touched flesh to destroy Antony's faint connuptions. He leaned forward and sank his teeth into his boy's sun-warmed skin. The blood that flooded his mouth was just as good as he'd remembered. Perhaps better. The boy could spit all the eggs he wanted, Antony decided. It would be well worth it.